Newlywed wife texted her mom, he broke my arm. Sent to wrong number. Vampire King replied, don't move. I'm coming. I couldn't think past the pain. Every breath stabbed my ribs like fire, but my eyes kept drifting to my right arm, twisted at an angle no arm should ever bend. Broken. There was no denying it. The bathroom floor was freezing against my bare legs as I pressed myself into the corner between the toilet and the tub, trying to make myself smaller, trying to become invisible. The door rattled violently in its frame. Abigail, open this door right now. Ethan, my husband, the man who'd slipped that ring on my finger 8 weeks ago with tears in his eyes and promises on his lips. The man who had just thrown me into our bookshelf because I'd forgotten to pick up his dry cleaning. Baby, I'm so sorry. You know I love you. Just let me in so I can help you. His voice melted from fury into that honeyed tone that always followed the violence. That voice used to unlock something in me. Used to make me think maybe this time was different. Maybe this time the sweet Ethan would stay. But there's a limit to how many times you can believe the same lie before it loses all meaning. I grabbed for my phone with my left hand. My right arm hung useless and wrong, cradled against my ribs. The screen had a spiderweb crack across it, like my marriage vows, like my naive heart, like the bone jutting beneath the skin of my forearm. I needed Mama. She'd tried to tell me. She'd said Ethan's whirlwind courtship was a red flag wrapped in roses. Said no man proposes after 3 months unless he's hiding something. Don't make me come through this door, Abigail. My head pounded where it had struck the wall. My vision swam, tears mixing with the blood from the cut on my forehead. I fumbled through my contacts, desperately searching for Mama's name. My hands were shaking so badly. Blood smeared the screen from my arm, from my split lip, from the defensive wounds on my palms. I pressed what looked like her contact and typed one-handed. Mama, he broke my arm. I'm locked in bathroom. He's going to kill me this time. Please. 421 Riverside Towers, Apt 8B. I hit send like a prayer. The door shook as Ethan's weight crashed against it. The flimsy lock was already bending. My phone lit up. Who is this? Wrong number. The realization hit like ice water. No. Not possible. Not when I was this close to dying in a bathroom that still smelled like this morning's vanilla candle. I'd clicked the wrong contact in my panic. One stupid mistake, and it would be my last. Abigail, I'm counting to 5. I typed again, fingers slipping on the blood-slick screen. Please help, husband broke my arm. He's breaking down the door. I'm so scared. The reply came instantly. Don't move. I'm coming. I stared at those 4 words. I didn't know this person. Didn't know if they were even real, or a bot, or some teenager on the other end who'd think this was a prank. But they were the only chance I had left. I sent the address again, adding, hurry please, don't call police, won't help. 1. I'd tried the police during the engagement, after he'd shoved me into the car door and blamed it on me, not watching where I was going. The responding officer had looked at Ethan's expensive suit and my stammering explanation and suggested I be more careful. Suggested, maybe, I was exaggerating. 2. Another message appeared. Stay where you are. 8 minutes. Hide. 8 minutes. Ethan would be through this door in 30 seconds. The lock was already splitting from the frame. 3. I pulled my knees to my chest, my broken arms screaming in protest. 4. The wood began to crack. 5. The door exploded inward in a shower of splinters. Ethan stood in the doorway, chest heaving, face twisted with that expression I'd learned to fear. But before he could take a single step toward me, the world shifted. The apartment's front door didn't just open. It detonated. The sound was like a thunderclap, the entire frame ripping away from the wall as if something massive and unstoppable had struck it. The force shook the floor beneath me. A figure filled the entrance, backlit by the hallway light, and my breath caught in my throat. He was tall, impossibly so, dressed entirely in black except for the silver embroidery that traced intricate patterns across his jacket. But it was his face that stopped time. Skin like marble, pale and flawless, framed by platinum hair pulled back severely from features that were too perfect, too sharp to be entirely human. His eyes found mine across the apartment, and something ancient and utterly inhuman looked back at me. Behind him, 3 others moved into the space, silent and coordinated like shadows given form. Ethan spun around. "Who the hell do you think you?" He never finished. One moment Ethan was standing upright, and the next he was pinned against the wall, the pale man's hand wrapped around his throat. I hadn't even seen him move. It was as if he'd simply ceased to exist in the doorway and reappeared 5 feet away in the space between heartbeats. "You," the stranger said, his voice carrying an accent I couldn't place and a coldness that made the room's temperature drop, "will never touch her again. Not if you understand." Ethan's eyes bulged. He managed a frantic nod, his feet dangling inches off the ground. "Good." The pale man released him, and Ethan crumpled to the floor, gasping. Then the stranger turned to me, and his expression transformed. The terrifying predator vanished, replaced by something careful, almost gentle. "Miss Abigail," he said, extending a hand that he kept at a respectful distance. "My name is Magnus Darius. You're safe now." One of the figures behind him, a woman with kind eyes, moved past the others and knelt beside me. "Let me help you stand," she murmured. "We're going to get you somewhere safe. Somewhere he can't follow." I let her guide me up, my legs barely supporting my weight. As she led me past Ethan's trembling form and out into the hallway, I looked back once. Magnus stood over my husband, watching him with the patience of a statue, making absolutely certain he wouldn't move, making certain I could leave. The vehicle waiting at the curb was like nothing I'd ever seen outside of a movie. Sleek, black, with windows so dark they looked like sheets of obsidian. The woman who'd helped me, she'd whispered her name was Elena, guided me into the back seat with a gentleness that made my throat tight. I expected Magnus to climb in beside me, but he remained on the sidewalk, speaking in low tones to the other guards. Through the tinted glass, I watched him give instructions, his movements precise and commanding. Then he pulled out a phone and made a call, his eyes flicking once toward the car, toward me, before turning away. Elena sat beside me, producing a soft blanket from somewhere and draping it across my lap. "The healer is waiting," she said simply. "Hospital." I managed, my voice hoarse. She hesitated. "Somewhere better. Somewhere private." The car moved through the city streets with unnatural smoothness, as if it floated rather than drove. I cradled my arm, trying not to look at the wrong angle of it, trying not to think about what I just witnessed. That speed. That impossible, inhuman speed. We pulled into an underground garage beneath a building I didn't recognize. No signs, no markings. Just concrete and shadows and the sound of our footsteps echoing as Elena led me to an elevator with buttons that had no numbers, only symbols. The doors opened onto a space that looked more like a luxury spa than any medical facility I'd ever seen. Dim lighting, dark wood panels, and the scent of something herbal and unfamiliar. A man waited there, older, with silver-streaked hair and the same unsettling grace Magnus had displayed. "Abigail," he said, as if we were old acquaintances. "I'm Dr. Castellano. Let's tend to that arm." I sat in a chair that felt like butter-soft leather, and he examined my injury with cool, steady fingers. "This will hurt less than you expect," he murmured, and produced a small vial of something dark and viscous. "What is that?" "Something very old, very effective." He met my eyes, and I saw it then, the same ancient quality that had been in Magnus' gaze. "You've entered a different world tonight, Miss Abigail. The pain you're in is mortal. but my methods are not. He applied the substance to my skin, and warmth spread through my arm like liquid sunlight. The grinding agony began to recede, replaced by a deep, pulling sensation as if my bones were remembering how they were supposed to fit together. "What are you?" I whispered. Dr. Castellano smiled, revealing teeth that were just slightly too sharp. "A healer. That's all that matters right now." By the time he finished, my arm was wrapped in pristine white bandages, stabilized in a way that felt more secure than any cast. The cuts on my face had been cleaned and treated with that same strange salve. I felt hollowed out, exhausted, but the pain had dulled to a manageable ache. Elena reappeared. "The penthouse is ready." Another elevator. This one climbed so high my ears popped. When the doors opened, I stepped into a space of floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire glittering cityscape. Minimalist furniture in blacks and grays. Security panels by every door. A fortress disguised as luxury. "You'll be safe here," Elena said, showing me the bedroom, the bathroom stocked with everything I could need. "No one enters without clearance. Magnus has assigned a rotation to watch the building." I sank onto the edge of the bed, staring at my bandaged arm, at the impossible healing, at the view of a city that suddenly felt foreign. I'd been saved by something out of a storybook, something with fangs and speed and power beyond comprehension. I'd been saved by a vampire. The first night I didn't sleep. I sat in that enormous bed with its silk sheets and watched the city lights blur and sharpen through my tears. Every sound made me flinch. The hum of the climate control, the distant ding of the elevator, footsteps in the hallway that never approached my door. Elena had left me with her number programmed into a new phone. "Anything you need," she'd said. "Anytime." What I needed was to wake up 8 weeks ago and run when Ethan first raised his voice. What I needed was my mama. What I needed was for the last 6 hours to be a nightmare I could shake off. Instead, I was in a penthouse that probably cost more per month than I'd earn in a year, saved by a creature that shouldn't exist. The second day, I found the courage to explore. Every room was immaculate, decorated with a kind of understated elegance that screamed wealth so old it didn't need to announce itself. Original artwork on the walls. I recognized a signature that made my art history degree weep. Books in languages I couldn't read lining built-in shelves. A kitchen stocked with fresh food that someone had delivered while I slept. The security panel by the front door had a screen showing 4 different camera angles of the hallway and lobby. I watched a figure in black patrol past, moving with that same liquid grace Selena had. Guard rotation, she'd called it. I was in a gilded cage. A beautiful, safe, terrifying cage. The third day, I stood at the windows and tried to find my apartment building in the sprawl below. Tried to imagine Ethan down there somewhere, probably spinning some story to his friends about his crazy wife. Would he tell them a group of strangers had broken down our door? Would he even remember Magnus' face, or had fear erased the details? Did it matter? I pressed my forehead against the cool glass. Magnus Darius. The name felt heavy in my mouth when I whispered it. What did he want from me? Creatures like him. Vampires. God, vampires were real. They didn't save random women out of kindness. There had to be a cost. There was always a cost. Maybe he'd want my blood. Maybe he'd want worse. Maybe I'd traded one monster for another, swapping mortal brutality for something ancient and unknowable. The thought made my knees weak, and I slid down to sit on the floor, back against the window, staring at my bandaged arm. The bone had already stopped aching. Dr. Castellano's treatment was working faster than anything human medicine could achieve. In a week, maybe less, I'd be healed. And then what? The tears came harder then, racking sobs that I'd been holding back since the bathroom floor. I cried for the girl who'd believed Ethan's promises. I cried for the wedding I thought would be the beginning of happiness. I cried for the fact that my rescue had come from something that shouldn't exist, that defied everything I'd believed about the world. I cried because I was alive, and I didn't know if I should be grateful or terrified. The sun set over the city, painting the sky in shades of amber and blood, and I stayed on the floor until the darkness came. Until I heard the elevator doors open in the hallway and footsteps, calm, measured, purposeful, approaching my door. 3 soft knocks. Not demanding, almost hesitant. I wiped my face with my sleeve and stood, my legs unsteady. Through the peephole I saw him, Magnus Darius, still dressed in black, his platinum hair catching the hallway light like spun silver. He held something in his hands, a covered tray. I opened the door halfway, keeping my body behind it like a shield. Miss Abigail. He inclined his head, a gesture that felt oddly formal, almost courtly. May I come in? I've brought dinner. I should have said no. Should have demanded answers first. Should have built walls between myself and this beautiful, terrifying stranger. Instead, I stepped aside. He moved into the apartment with that same impossible grace, setting the tray on the dining table. When he lifted the cover, the aroma made my stomach clench with sudden, desperate hunger. Herb-crusted salmon, roasted vegetables that still steamed, wild rice pilaf, and a small dish of what looked like lemon sorbet. You haven't eaten properly in days, he said, pulling out a chair. Not for himself, for me. Please, sit. I sat, more from shock than obedience. Magnus remained standing, his hands clasped behind his back, maintaining a distance that felt intentional. You have questions, he said. That's natural. But first, you need sustenance. Eat, and then we'll talk. The food tasted like something from a dream. Each bite was perfection, flavors layered and complex in a way that made me realize how long it had been since I'd had a real meal. Ethan had controlled that too, when I ate what I ate, criticizing every pound, every bite. Magnus watched me with an expression I couldn't read. Patient. Almost sad. When I'd finished, he finally moved, settling into the chair across from me with the careful movements of someone trying not to startle a wounded animal. You're wondering what I want from you, he said. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Nothing. The word hung in the air between us. I want nothing from you, Abigail. No debt. No obligation. No payment of any kind. Then why? The question burst out. Why save me? You don't know me. I texted the wrong number, and you came. You brought an army. You put me here, in this place that probably costs more than I'll ever have. Why? Magnus was quiet for a long moment, his pale eyes distant, as if looking at something centuries away. I've lived a very long time, he said finally. Long enough to see patterns repeat across generations. The strong preying on the weak. The cruel finding justifications for their cruelty. When you have power, real power, you have a choice. You can use it to take, or you can use it to protect. He leaned forward slightly. I've spent lifetimes taking, Abigail. Centuries. And I'm tired of it. So when I received your message, when I saw what was happening to you. He paused. I chose differently. You're saying you save people? That's what you do. Sometimes. When the opportunity presents itself. When my people alert me to situations that warrant intervention. His expression hardened. Men like your husband, they believe they're untouchable. They believe no consequence will ever find them. I find it satisfying to prove them wrong. I looked at my bandaged arm, at this impossible creature sitting across from me with his ancient eyes and perfect courtesy. What happens now? Now you heal. You rest. And when you're ready, only when you're ready, I have a proposition. He stood, moving toward the window. I've acquired an extensive collection over the centuries. Art, manuscripts, artifacts from civilizations that no longer exist. I need someone with expertise to help catalog and preserve them. Someone who understands their historical significance. He glanced back at me. Elena mentioned you studied art history. My degree. The one I'd never gotten to use because Ethan had convinced me to take that office job instead, where he could check on me throughout the day. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you purpose, Magnus corrected gently. Something to rebuild yourself around. No pressure. No timeline. But the position is yours if you want it. He moved toward the door, then stopped. One more thing, Abigail. You're free to leave here whenever you wish. This isn't a prison. It's sanctuary. The choice has always been yours. After he left, I sat in the silence, staring at the empty tray. A vampire had just offered me a job, had promised me freedom, had given me the first real choice I'd had in months. I touched my arm, feeling the bone knitting beneath the bandages, and wondered if maybe, just maybe, the wrong number had been exactly right. The archive was housed in a building I'd passed 100 times without noticing. Unmarked door, no signage, nestled between a bookshop and a cafe in the historic district. Elena escorted me inside 2 weeks after Magnus' offer, after Dr. Castellano had removed my bandages and declared my arm remarkably healed. The space took my breath away. 3 floors of climate-controlled rooms filled with artifacts that belonged in museums. Roman pottery, medieval manuscripts in protective cases, paintings by artists whose names I'd only read in textbooks, Asian ceramics that predated the Ming Dynasty, Egyptian fragments that still held traces of pigment after millennia. This is impossible, I whispered, standing in the center of it all. How does he have all of this? Elena smiled. When you have centuries to collect and the resources to acquire properly, you accumulate quite a bit. Most of it was purchased legally. Some of it was rescued from situations where it would have been destroyed. A young woman appeared from between the shelves, human by the warmth in her cheeks, carrying a tablet. You must be Abigail. I'm Nora Chen, junior archivist. Thank God you're here. We've been drowning trying to catalog the Renaissance section. Over the following weeks, I discovered a rhythm I hadn't known I needed. Morning coffee while reviewing acquisition records. Afternoons carefully photographing and documenting pieces. My hands steady as I handled objects that had survived wars and revolutions. Evenings spent researching provenance, losing myself in histories that stretched back further than I could fathom. Nora became my anchor to the mortal world. She was brilliant, funny, and refreshingly normal. Married to a lawyer, obsessed with her cat, completely aware of what Magnus was and utterly unfazed by it. He gave me this job when I was fresh out of grad school and drowning in debt, she told me over lunch one day. Never asked for anything except good work. Some of the coven members are intense, sure, but Magnus? He's actually one of the good ones. Weird to say about a vampire, I know. I'd started to see what she meant. Magnus visited the archive once a week, always during evening hours. He'd walk through the rooms with that ancient, careful attention, asking questions about my progress, listening with genuine interest as I explained my cataloging system. But I also saw the other side of him. The night 3 coven members came to discuss some territorial dispute, and his voice dropped to a tone that made the air itself seem to freeze. The way even Elena and the other guards straightened when he entered a room, that instinctive deference to a predator far above them in the hierarchy. He was patient with me, yes. Respectful and careful and kind. But he was also a king, ancient and powerful, with blood on his hands that stretched back centuries. One evening, I found him standing before a Byzantine icon, his expression distant. She painted this, he said without looking at me. A woman named Theodora, 7th century. She was brilliant, fierce, refused to let anyone tell her she couldn't create because of her gender. His fingers hovered near the gilded surface without touching. I commissioned it. Watched her work for 6 months. She died of fever the winter after she finished. Did you try to save her? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Magnus turned to me, something raw in his expression. I offered. She refused. Said she'd lived a full life on her own terms and wouldn't trade her mortality for anything. He smiled, sad and distant. She was wiser than I was. I found myself moving closer. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to understand something, Abigail. His pale eyes met mine. I'm not human. I haven't been for over 1,000 years. I can protect you, provide for you, offer you opportunities. But I can never truly understand what it means to be mortal, to have that precious, finite time. What you're doing here, he gestured to the archive around us, reclaiming your life, your purpose, your autonomy, that's entirely yours. That's the part one can't give you. That's the part you have to take back yourself. I looked down at my arm, now fully healed, stronger than it had been before. Looked at the artifact logs on my tablet, weeks of work that was mine, earned by my knowledge and effort. Looked at this creature who'd saved me but refused to own me. I'm getting there, I said quietly. Magnus' expression softened. I know you are. I can see it. You're becoming yourself again. For the first time since that night on the bathroom floor, I believed it might be true. The dinner started casually. Magnus would appear at the archive near closing time, asking if I'd eaten. The first few times I declined, but eventually I said yes. We'd sit in quiet restaurants where the staff clearly knew him, where no one questioned why we occupied corner tables in the dimmest sections. He never ordered food for himself, only wine that he barely touched, while I worked through courses he'd somehow known I would love. Our conversations wandered through centuries. He told me about the fall of Constantinople, not from history books but from memory, the sound of the walls crumbling, the smell of smoke, the refugees flooding through streets he'd walked for decades. I told him about growing up in a small town, about my mother's garden, about the first time I'd seen a real Rembrandt, and understood what art could mean. You speak of your past in present tense, he observed one evening, watching me over the rim of his wine glass. Your mother's garden, not had. Has. I set down my fork, because it still exists. She's still there, still planting tomatoes every spring. I just haven't been able to contact her. Why not? The truth felt heavy on my tongue. Because Ethan made me cut ties. Said she was toxic, controlling. Made every phone call a fight until I stopped trying. I met his eyes. And because I'm ashamed. She warned me, and I didn't listen. How do I call her now and say, you were right and I almost died proving you wrong? Magnus leaned forward. You call her and say, I survived. I'm here. I love you. That's all a mother needs to hear. I did call her the next day. Sobbed through the entire conversation while Mama cried and thanked God and promised to visit as soon as I was ready. When I hung up, I felt lighter than I had in months. But that night, lying in the penthouse that still didn't feel like mine, the weight settled back in. The next evening, I asked Magnus to meet me at the archive after hours. He arrived precisely on time, concern flickering across his perfect features. I can't do this anymore, I said without preamble. He went very still. I see. No, you don't. I paced between the shelves, gathering courage. This penthouse, the guards, the protection, it's generous. It's saved my life. But I'm still living in a space you own, eating food you provide, existing in a bubble you've created. I'm still dependent. I'm still not free. You're free, Abigail. I've told you. Saying it doesn't make it true. I stopped, facing him. I have a salary now. A real job. I need my own apartment. Something I pay for with my own money. Somewhere that's mine because I chose it, not because you're protecting me. Magnus' expression was unreadable. You believe I'll refuse. I think you'll try to convince me it's unnecessary, that I'm still in danger, that the penthouse is safer. And maybe you're right, but I need this, Magnus. I need to know I can stand on my own 2 feet or I'll never really be standing at all. The silence stretched between us, and I braced myself for the argument, the rational explanation of why I was being foolish. Instead, he smiled. Actually smiled, something warm and genuine that transformed his ancient features. You're absolutely right, he said quietly. And I'm a fool for not seeing it sooner. What? This is exactly what you should do. Elena will help you find a place tomorrow. Something safe, but yours. The salary you earn is more than sufficient for a quality apartment. He moved closer, stopping at a respectful distance. True freedom isn't given, Abigail. It's claimed. The fact that you're claiming it now, that you're willing to risk my reaction to demand it. He paused, something like pride in his voice. That's the strongest thing I've seen you do. I felt tears prickling. You're not angry? Angry? I'm honored. He inclined his head in that courtly gesture. You're not a subject to be protected, Abigail. You're a woman reclaiming her sovereignty. There's nothing more powerful than that. 3 weeks later, I stood in my own apartment, modest, affordable, mine, and hung my first piece of art on the wall. A print of that Byzantine icon Theodora had painted, a reminder of a woman who'd lived on her own terms. When Magnus visited that first evening, he knocked softly and waited for me to invite him in. He brought nothing but himself, understanding that this space needed no gifts, no demonstrations of his wealth. It suits you, he said, looking around at the simple furniture, the plants I'd bought, the life I was building. It's mine, I replied. Yes, he agreed, his pale eyes warm. It is. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt like I belonged to myself. Summer arrived, painting the city in gold and green. I'd been in my apartment for 2 months, and the space had transformed into something that felt genuinely mine. Books on every surface. Plants thriving on the windowsill. A small kitchen where I'd relearned how to cook for pleasure instead of fear. Magnus visited twice a week, always after sunset, always by invitation. We'd established a rhythm. Sometimes I'd cook, sometimes we'd order in, and we'd talk for hours about everything and nothing. He taught me phrases and languages that no longer existed. I introduced him to modern films, laughing at his bemused reactions to special effects. One evening in July, we sat on my small balcony watching the city lights flicker to life. I'd made pasta from my grandmother's recipe, and Magnus had pretended not to notice I'd set out wine for him that he wouldn't drink. Can I ask you something? I said, breaking a comfortable silence. Always. Do you ever miss it? Being human. Eating food. Feeling sunlight, all of it. Magnus considered the question, his profile sharp against the darkening sky. I miss the simplicity of it. The way everything mattered because it was finite. But I don't mourn what I was. That man died a very long time ago. Do you regret it? The choice to become this. Every day and never. He turned to me, and something in his expression made my heart stutter. For centuries, I believed immortality was a gift. Power, time, the ability to shape the world. But lately, I've wondered if perhaps the real gift is simpler than that. What do you mean? The gift of mattering to someone. Of being chosen. Not for what you can provide or the protection you offer, but simply for who you are. His pale eyes held mine. You've given me that, Abigail. Even knowing what I am, you choose to spend your evenings with me. You argue with me about art history and laugh at my terrible attempts to understand modern music. You see the monster and the man, and you don't flinch. My breath caught. Magnus. I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I simply wanted you to know. You've become important. More than I expected. More than I knew I could still feel. I set down my wine glass with shaking hands. The air between us felt charged, electric. What if I wanted you to ask for something? He went very still, that supernatural stillness that reminded me he wasn't human. Abigail, I need you to be certain. I need you to understand that I would never. I know. I shifted closer. That's exactly why I'm certain. Then I'm asking, he said softly, for your permission to kiss you. Only if you want this. Only if you're ready. You can say no, and nothing between us will change. My answer was to close the distance between us. The kiss was nothing like I'd expected. Gentle at first, almost reverent, his cool lips against mine with a tenderness that made my chest ache. He let me control the pace, never pushing, never demanding. It was the opposite of every touch Ethan had given me. Where there had been possession, there was now choice. Where there had been pain, there was gentleness. Where there had been fear, there was trust so profound it terrified me. When we finally pulled apart, I was breathless, and Magnus looked at me like I was something precious he was afraid to break. Abigail, he whispered, his thumb tracing my cheekbone. Are you all right? I laughed, the sound watery. I'm perfect. The words caught in my throat. I'm not afraid. Do you understand? For the first time, I'm not afraid. Something fierce and tender crossed his features. You never need to be. Not with me. Not ever. We sat on that balcony until the early hours, his arm around my shoulders, my head resting against his chest where no heartbeat sounded. He told me stories of ancient summers, of empires that had risen and fallen, of art and music and beauty that had survived centuries. And I told him about the future I wanted to build. A life that was mine, but that maybe, possibly, could have room for an immortal king who'd answered a wrong number text and changed everything. Take all the time you need, he murmured against my hair. I have nothing but time, and I would wait centuries for you. You won't have to, I said, lacing my fingers through his. I'm already here. The kiss he pressed to my forehead was soft as moonlight, and I felt something inside me settle. Something that had been broken and terrified and lost, finally finding its way home. Not to a place, but to a choice. To freedom. To love that asked for nothing except the chance to be chosen in return. It happened on a Thursday evening, 3 months after I'd moved into my apartment. I was locking up the archive, Nora having left an hour earlier for her anniversary dinner. The building was quiet, just the hum of climate control and my footsteps echoing through the halls. I didn't hear him approach. Didn't sense him until his voice cut through the silence like a blade. Hello, Abigail. I spun around, and there he was, Ethan. Thinner than I remembered, his eyes hollow and wild. And in his right hand, a gun pointed directly at my chest. Did you think I wouldn't find you? His laugh was unhinged. Did you think you could just disappear? That your freak boyfriend could hide you forever? My heart hammered, but my mind went oddly clear. Elena had insisted I learn basic self-defense. Had drilled me on staying calm, on assessing options. Ethan, you need to leave. Now. Need to leave? He stepped closer, the gun shaking in his grip. I spent 6 weeks in a cell because of you. Because of him. Do you know what it's like, knowing your wife is with a monster? Knowing she chose a vampire over her own husband. You broke my arm, I said, my voice steady despite the terror clawing at my throat. You would have killed me that night. Magnus saved my life. He ruined mine. Ethan's finger tensed on the trigger. I'm going to fix that. I'm going to make him watch you die, and then... I moved before he could finish. Elena's training took over. I lunged sideways as he fired, the shot going wide and shattering a display case behind me. I grabbed a bronze statue from the nearest pedestal and swung it with everything I had. It connected with his wrist. The gun clattered to the floor. Ethan roared, lunging at me, but I was ready. I drove my knee up into his stomach the way Elena had taught me, then shoved him back with both hands. He stumbled, crashing into a shelf. I ran for the panic button hidden beneath the main desk, slamming my palm against it. The silent alarm would alert Magnus' guards immediately. Would alert Magnus himself. Ethan was on his feet, charging at me with his hands outstretched. I ducked under his arms, spun, and struck him across the back of his knee with the statue. He went down hard, cursing. "You're different," he gasped, blood trickling from his lip where he'd bitten it. "You're not the same weak." "No," I interrupted, standing over him with the statue raised. "I'm not, and I never will be again." The archive doors exploded inward. Magnus stood in the entrance, and he was terrifying. His pale features had gone sharp, predatory, his eyes glowing with an inhuman light. Behind him, four guards fanned out, moving with that liquid grace that marked them as something other. "Abigail." His voice was controlled, but barely. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine." He fired once, missed. Magnus' gaze shifted to Ethan, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. He crossed the distance in a blur, hauling Ethan up by his collar and slamming him against the wall with enough force to crack the plaster. "You came to my territory," Magnus said, each word precise and cold. "You threatened what is mine. Give me one reason I shouldn't end you right here." "Magnus, wait." I stepped forward, and he immediately looked at me, that ancient fury banking slightly. "It's my choice, isn't it? What happens to him?" Understanding flickered across his features. He released Ethan slightly, letting him slide down the wall, but keeping him pinned. "Always your choice, Abigail. Always." I looked at Ethan, at the man who'd broken me, who'd nearly destroyed me, who'd come here tonight to finish what he'd started. And I felt nothing but pity. "Call the police," I said firmly. "The real ones, not his brother. Let the mortal system judge him. Breaking and entering, assault with a deadly weapon, attempted murder. That's enough to put him away for years." Magnus studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. "Elena, make the call." Ethan's eyes widened. "You can't. I'll tell them what you are. I'll tell everyone about the vampires, about." "Tell them," Magnus said softly. "Who do you think they'll believe? A desperate man caught in the act, or their own eyes telling them you're simply unhinged?" He leaned closer. "You lost, Ethan Bradley. You lost the moment you raised your hand to her." The police arrived within minutes. I gave my statement clearly, showed them the gun, the security footage from the hidden cameras Magnus had insisted be installed. Ethan was cuffed and taken away, still raving about monsters and conspiracies. After they left, Magnus turned to me, his features returned to their usual careful composure. "You fought him," he said, something like awe in his voice. "You won. I learned from the best." I set down the bronze statue, my hands finally starting to shake. "And I chose myself. I chose my life, my rules, my justice." Magnus pulled me into his arms, and I let myself collapse against his chest, finally allowing the fear to surface now that it was over. "You were magnificent," he whispered. "Absolutely magnificent." Ethan's trial was swift. With security footage, my testimony, and the physical evidence, his lawyer advised him to take a plea deal. 15 years for attempted murder, assault with a deadly weapon, and breaking and entering. No parole for at least 10. I didn't just attend the sentencing. I didn't need to. That chapter of my life was closed, and I had no desire to give him even one more moment of my attention. Instead, I threw myself into my work. The archives collection had grown, and with it, my reputation. Museums were starting to contact us for consultations. Universities wanted to collaborate. I'd even been asked to write an article for an academic journal about preservation techniques for medieval manuscripts. 6 months after Ethan's imprisonment, Magnus and I stood in the archive after hours. I'd just finished cataloging a collection of Islamic astronomical instruments from the 9th century, and I was explaining their significance with the kind of enthusiasm that always made him smile. "You're glowing," he said, watching me gesture at the intricate brass astrolabe. "I'm passionate about my work." I set the instrument down carefully. "There's a difference." "There is. And it suits you." He moved closer, his expression shifting to something more serious. "Abigail, there's something I'd like to discuss with you." My heart skipped. That sounds ominous. Not ominous. Important. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a small wooden box, aged and polished by time. "I've been alive for over a millennium. I've seen empires rise and fall. I've loved and lost and believed I understood what it meant to connect with another being." He opened the box. "And then you texted the wrong number, and everything I thought I knew became irrelevant." Inside the box lay a ring unlike anything I'd ever seen. Not a diamond, but a moonstone set in carved silver, so ancient it looked like liquid metal. Symbols I didn't recognize traced the band. Protective runes, perhaps, or something older. "This belonged to a woman I knew in Constantinople," Magnus said softly. "A scholar who chose to spend her final years documenting history rather than becoming like me. She said that true immortality wasn't in living forever, but in making choices that mattered. In loving freely." He lifted the ring from the box. "She gave this to me when she was dying and told me to give it to someone who understood the value of both freedom and commitment." My breath caught. "Abigail, I'm not asking you to become immortal. I'm not asking you to change anything about who you are. I'm asking if you'll share your mortal life with me, for however long you have. If you'll let me stand beside you while you continue to grow and thrive and become even more than you already are." His pale eyes held mine. "Will you marry me? Not because you need my protection, but because you choose this. Choose us." I looked at the ring, at this ancient vampire king kneeling in an archive surrounded by artifacts of human achievement, offering me something no one ever had before, complete freedom to choose my own path, even if that path included him. "Yes," I said, and my voice didn't shake. "Yes, I choose this. I choose you. I choose us." He slipped the ring onto my finger, and it fit perfectly, the moonstone catching the light like captured starlight. When he kissed me, it was gentle and reverent and full of promises that didn't need words. "Thank you," he whispered against my lips. "For what?" "For sending that text to the wrong number. For being brave enough to fight for yourself. For choosing to live." He pulled back slightly, his smile transforming his ancient features. "For choosing me, even knowing what I am." I touched his face, this impossible being who'd saved my life and then stepped back to let me save myself. You know what the funny thing is? I don't think it was the wrong number at all. I think it was exactly the number I was supposed to send. Fate. He raised an eyebrow. Choice, I corrected.
Mine.
Yours. All of it leading here. Later, standing at my apartment window with Magnus' arms around me and his ring on my finger, I thought about the woman I'd been that night, broken, terrified, trapped in a bathroom with no hope. She'd sent a desperate text and found salvation. But more than that, she'd found herself again, found strength she didn't know she had, found love that honored rather than controlled. And in doing so, she discovered that sometimes the best things in life come from the mistakes we make while fighting to survive. If Abigail's journey from broken to unbreakable moved you, if you believe in second chances and choosing your own destiny, please like this video and subscribe. Share this story with someone who needs to hear that they're stronger than they know. Your support helps us bring more stories of courage and hope to life.